The congressional hearing room grew silent as Pam Bondi approached the microphone. Her blonde hair perfectly arranged and her navy suit immaculate. The former Florida Attorney General's gaze fixed firmly on Representative Jasmine Crockett, seated across the chamber. Congresswoman Crockett has been spreading false information for months, Bondi declared, her tone sharp and unwavering. Today, I'm presenting proof that will expose the truth. The C-SPAN cameras captured Crockett's calm and steady expression, her red blazer striking against Bondi's conservative blue. For a brief moment, surprise flickered across Crockett's face as Bondi raised a folder labeled Confidential. What Congresswoman Crockett has been hiding from the American public will astonish you. Bondi continued, her voice gaining intensity. And once you see what I've uncovered, you'll understand why she's worked so hard to divert attention. The committee chairman's gavel struck repeatedly as murmurs rippled through the audience. Republican members leaned forward eagerly while Democrats exchanged uneasy glances. No one expected what came next. As Bondi opened her folder with a touch of drama, Crockett calmly reached for her microphone. The next 30 seconds would silence the entire room. Bondi's expression shifted, color fading from her face, marking a turning point in the entire proceeding. Before diving deeper into this heated exchange, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more political moments that mainstream outlets often overlook. Pam Bondi stood before the congressional committee with the assurance of someone accustomed to public scrutiny. As Florida's first female attorney general serving from 2011 to 2019, she had earned recognition as a determined conservative voice. Her close alliance with former President Trump made her a favorite among Republican media circles and a frequent commentator on Fox News. For those unfamiliar with me, Bondi began, her Southern accent gently coloring her words. I've spent my career defending truth and accountability. When elected officials misuse public trust, I cannot remain silent. The hearing, originally focused on federal emergency response funding, had drifted off course when Bondi was invited as a special witness by Republican members. Democrats objected to her inclusion, insisting she lacked direct expertise on the topic. Across the room sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a freshman Democrat from Texas whose swift political ascent made her both a target and a rising influence. A former civil rights attorney with a law degree from the University of Houston, Crockett had quickly become known for her bold, progressive stance. Crockett appeared composed, occasionally jotting notes, her expression unreadable as Bondi pressed on with her remarks. This isn't about differing opinions, Bondi stated firmly. What we've witnessed from Representative Crockett is a pattern of intentional misinformation that undermines public trust. The stakes were immense, with midterm elections approaching and congressional control in question. The clash represented more than a personal dispute. It symbolized the ongoing ideological divide across the nation. Conservative calls for order versus progressive demands for reform. The chamber was filled with journalists, aides, and citizens. Cameras lined the walls, streaming every expression to millions of viewers. Party media teams on both sides stood ready to edit and circulate clips favoring their own narratives. Bondi stepped closer to the witness table, carefully arranging her documents. I've spent weeks gathering this information, she said, lowering her voice. What I discovered reveals a troubling pattern the American people must be aware of. Crockett, renowned for her quick wit and sharper arguments, remained uncharacteristically silent, rather than her usual animated responses. She watched Bondi with the calm focus of an attorney waiting for cross-examination. The committee chairman, a senior Republican, nodded at Bondi. Please proceed with your testimony. Miss Bondi, you have the floor. As Bondi sorted her papers, a staffer slipped Crockett a brief note. Whatever it contained raised one of her eyebrows before she composed herself, tucking it neatly away. She straightened her blazer, ready for the confrontation ahead. The air in the room grew tense with anticipation. This moment was about to ignite a political spectacle that would dominate news cycles for weeks. Bondi rose confidently, her stance firm like a prosecutor, ready to present closing arguments. With a click, the large screens around the room lit up. displaying a social media post from Congresswoman Crockett dated 3 months earlier. "Let me draw your attention to this statement," Bondi said, pointing at the screen here. Representative Crockett claimed that emergency relief funds for hurricane recovery were being The claim that funds were withheld from minority communities was entirely false. Bondi advanced to the next slide, revealing FEM's official distribution maps. These verified records confirmed that allocations were based solely on damage assessments, not demographics. This wasn't an oversight. It was a calculated move to stir racial division for political benefit. Murmurs rippled across the room. Republican members nodded in agreement while Democrats appeared uneasy. Crockett stayed composed, her gaze fixed on Bondi. "And that's just the start," Bondi continued firmly. "Now, let's examine the Congresswoman's remarks about police funding." The display shifted again, showing a quote from Crockett suggesting that law enforcement agencies were receiving militarized gear rather than community support. "This claim," Bondi said, lifting a document, "directly contradicts the appropriations bill Representative Crockett herself voted for, which clearly assigns 40% of the funds to community programs." A Republican member interjected. "So she's saying one thing back home and doing another here in Washington." "Exactly," Bondi replied, visibly satisfied. "It's a consistent pattern of misrepresentation." The chairman struck his gavel as Democrats objected to the remark. "The witness will continue without interruption," he ordered, his tone clearly showing bias. Crockett finally spoke, requesting to respond after Bondi's remarks. "You'll have your turn, Representative." The chairman replied curtly. As tensions grew, a Democratic member raised a procedural objection. "Mr. Chairman, testimony doesn't relate to the emergency response funding under discussion. Ms. Bondi isn't an expert witness in this area." The chairman dismissed the objection. "The committee has broad authority to explore relevant issues." The exchange only heightened the tension as Bondi proceeded, now projecting what looked like internal emails. "These communications," she declared, "prove that Representative Crockett knew the real funding data before making her statements. She understood the truth and still chose to mislead the public." Gasps filled the room. If proven authentic, the evidence could have serious political and ethical consequences. A senior Democratic congresswoman interrupted sharply. "Mr. Chairman, how did Ms. Bondi obtain what she claims are internal congressional emails? That's a serious security matter." The room descended into chaos. Reporters typed rapidly, Republicans huddled, and Democrats conferred urgently. Through it all, Crockett remained calm, quietly taking notes while keeping her focus on Bondi. Raising her voice above the noise, Bondi said, "The American people deserve honesty. These documents were obtained through proper legal means, and they exposed deliberate misinformation." The chairman struggled to restore order when suddenly a young aide entered and handed a note to a senior Democrat. Reading it, his expression changed to alarm. "Mr. Chairman," he announced, "we've just learned that parts of Ms. Bondi's evidence appear to have been altered. The originals don't match what's being shown." The revelation sent shockwaves through the chamber. Republicans shouted objections while Democrats demanded a recess to verify the materials. The chairman, now visibly unsettled, declared a 15-minute break. Cameras captured Bondi conferring urgently with Republican aides, her earlier confidence replaced by visible unease. Across the room, Crockett calmly gathered her documents, pausing briefly to consult with her Democratic colleagues. While the chamber buzzed with tension, she moved with steady composure, as if she had foreseen the entire sequence of events. When the committee reconvened, the air was thick with unease. Bondi resumed her testimony, but her earlier confidence had noticeably waned. She continued to raise new claims about Crockett's remarks on border policy and infrastructure funding. Yet her delivery lacked the assertiveness of her opening statement. As Bondi concluded, all attention turned toward Congresswoman Crockett. The room fell silent in anticipation. What followed would become one of the most circulated political exchanges of the year. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," Crockett began, her tone firm and even. In contrast to Bondi's emotional testimony, Crockett spoke with the careful precision of a seasoned attorney. First, I'd like to thank Ms. Bondi for her imaginative presentation. It's rare we get to see fiction constructed so thoroughly in real time. A soft wave of laughter rippled through the Democratic side. Instead of addressing each claim separately, she continued, opening her leather portfolio. I'll focus on the foundation of Ms. Bondi's entire testimony. Once that's clear, everything else becomes self-explanatory. She gestured to a staff member, and the screens in the room switched to display an email header. This is an email sent 3 weeks ago from Clark Davidson, political director of the Americans for Prosperity Foundation, to several recipients, including Ms. Bondi. Allow me to read the highlighted portion. Adjusting her glasses, Crockett read aloud. Operation Credibility. Kill must launch before the midterms. Crockett's visibility makes her the ideal target. Bondi will deliver the package at the emergency funding hearing. All materials will be supplied. The chamber erupted. Republican members shouted objections as Democrats demanded order. Reporters rapidly typed notes. Once the room quieted, Crockett continued with calm authority. Mr. Chairman, I have here the full email chain authenticated by cybersecurity experts. It reveals how the so-called evidence presented by Ms. Bondi was fabricated. Each document was altered from its original version. She advanced to the next slide, showing side-by-side comparisons of the original materials against Bondi's altered versions with differences highlighted in red. For example, Crockett explained this FEMA distribution map had its legend changed to omit the disaster severity index, making it seem as though aid was distributed by county regardless of need. Bondi's face lost color as she whispered to nearby Republican aides. Crockett pressed on. And regarding those internal emails Ms. Bondi cited, claiming I was briefed on funding allocations, they were selectively edited. Here is the original correspondence where I requested additional details because the initial data was incomplete. With each point, Crockett systematically dismantled Bondi's accusations. Her meticulous, lawyerly delivery made every piece of evidence land with precision. But perhaps most troubling, Crockett said, her voice carrying restrained anger. Is this the screen-displayed phone logs and calendar records? These show Ms. Bondi met with oil industry executives just days before this hearing. The same executives whose companies stand to gain from blocking the green energy measures. In this emergency funding bill, a collective gasp filled the chamber. The issue had shifted from partisan debate to potential corruption. Mr. Chairman, Crockett said, facing the DIs directly, I move that this committee refer this matter to the House Ethics Committee for investigation into Ms. Bond's testimony and possible violations of House rules regarding truthful statements before Congress. The chairman, visibly unsettled, tried to maintain composure. The committee will take your request under advisement, he managed. But Crockett wasn't finished. I'd also like to enter into record this independent fact-check analysis addressing each of Ms. Bondi's claims with full primary documentation. She lifted a thick binder. I prepared this not because I'm clairvoyant, but because we were alerted weeks ago to this coordinated smear attempt and chose to let it unfold to see how far it would go. Ina turned directly toward Bondi. Now we have our answer. The chamber fell silent. What began as an attack on Crockett had evolved into a scandal threatening Bondi's credibility. Breaking the quiet, a senior Republican known for her integrity addressed the chairman. Mr. Chairman, I believe Ms. Bondi's testimony should be stricken from the record pending verification of these serious claims. The bipartisan statement underscored the gravity of the situation. Bondi finally spoke, her voice shaking. These accusations are false. That email is fabricated. Crockett gave a calm, restrained smile. The metadata and authentication certificates are included with my submission. Ms. Bondi. Unlike your evidence, mine stands up to forensic review. Turning back to the committee, she concluded firmly, this isn't just about defending my name. It's about protecting the integrity of these proceedings and preserving public trust. If our committees become stages for misinformation, When an orchestrated character attack is built on manipulated evidence, it weakens the foundation of our legislative process. Her voice grew stronger and more resolute. The emergency funding bill before us is designed to deliver vital assistance to communities devastated by natural disasters. Communities where children still lack schools. Families remain in shelters and small businesses struggle to reopen. Yet, instead of addressing these urgent needs, we are sidetracked by political theatrics. As Crockett concluded her remarks, the atmosphere in the chamber shifted entirely. What began as a defense had turned into a powerful counterattack, leaving Bondi and her allies visibly shaken. The chairman, sensing the change, swiftly called for a recess. As members exited, cameras captured a striking contrast. Bondi hurriedly collecting her notes, her face stunned, while Crockett stood poised, accepting congratulations from colleagues on both sides. In just 15 minutes, Jasmine Crockett had not only defended herself, but reversed the entire narrative, emerging as the unexpected victor in a political ambush that had backfired spectacularly. Moments after the dramatic close of the hearing, Crockett takedown and Bondi backfire began trending across the nation. Clips of Crockett's.com yet methodical dismantling of Bondi's accusations spread rapidly across social media. News networks rushed to bring in analysts to interpret what had just unfolded. The headlines told the story clearly. Crockett exposes coordinated smear effort. Bondi faces possible ethics probe after failed attack. Outside the hearing room, reporters crowded around Congresswoman Crockett as she walked steadily through the Capitol corridor. "Congresswoman, did you anticipate this attack?" One shouted. Crockett paused, straightened her blazer, and replied, "We learned weeks ago of an organized attempt to discredit several Democratic representatives before the midterms. Instead of reacting immediately, we allowed the plan to proceed while collecting our own proof. Today's hearing confirmed what we suspected." Another journalist pressed on. "Will you file an ethics complaint against Miss Bondi?" Crockett responded firmly. "This isn't about personal revenge. It's about protecting the integrity of congressional proceedings. The relevant committees will examine the evidence and decide the next steps. My priority remains securing emergency funding for disaster victims who have already waited too long." Meanwhile, Pam Bondi was notably absent. Reports indicated she exited the Capitol through a side door, avoiding the awaiting media. Her scheduled TV appearance was abruptly canceled. By evening, the political landscape had shifted dramatically. 3 immediate outcomes followed. First, the emergency funding bill, previously stalled, regained momentum. Several Republican members who once opposed it now signaled their support. Eager to separate themselves from the tainted hearing, "We must get back to aiding disaster victims," declared a senior Republican who had earlier criticized the measure. "These distractions have delayed help for far too long." Second, the focus turned to the coordination between outside groups and congressional testimony. The emails Crockett presented pointed to a larger campaign targeting multiple Democratic representatives, prompting journalists to investigate possible ties among political action committees, lobbyists, and partisan media. This raises serious questions about who's truly shaping the agenda on Capitol Hill, observed a veteran correspondent. If outside interests are influencing testimony and manipulating facts, it poses a major threat to legislative independence. Third, and most notably, Jasmine Crockett's national profile rose dramatically. The first-term Congresswoman, already known for her passionate speeches, was now being hailed as a rising Democratic figure with significant potential. What we witnessed today was political malpractice met with prosecutorial precision, noted a former White House communications director. Crockett didn't just defend herself. She reframed the entire debate while keeping the focus on policy. That's an exceptionally rare skill in today's political climate. As night settled over Washington, the ripple effects continued. Conservative outlets scrambled to control the damage, some questioning the validity of Crockett's evidence, others quietly distancing themselves from Bondi. "We need to verify these claims before drawing conclusions," said one commentator. Another admitted, "If those emails are real, this represents a serious breach of public trust." Progressive media outlets praised Crockett's performance, calling it a masterclass in political counterpunching. "This is exactly how Democrats should combat disinformation," said one prominent liberal podcast host. "Be fully prepared. Let your opponents overreach, then respond with undeniable facts." By the next morning, the story had reached far beyond Washington. Major news networks replayed the exchange for audiences across the country, introducing many Americans to Crockett for the first time. "I've never seen anything quite like it," admitted a morning show host. These hearings usually lack substance. But Congresswoman Crockett came armed with evidence and presented it with the precision of a seasoned attorney. Investigations quickly turned to those involved in the attempted smear campaign. Financial records revealed notable contributions from energy companies to groups linked with the coordination effort, prompting concerns about corporate influence in political attacks. "Follow the money," urged a government ethics specialist. "When we see orchestrated efforts like this, financial motives are usually behind them." 3 days after the hearing, House Ethics Committee announced a formal probe into the testimony and supporting materials. In a rare bipartisan statement, committee leaders declared, "The American people deserve full confidence in the integrity of congressional proceedings." These claims require thorough examination regardless of party. For Pam Bondi, the consequences were immediate. Her media appearances declined as outlets questioned her credibility. Republican strategists also distanced themselves, wary of ties to what appeared to be a coordinated misinformation campaign. A week later, Bondi issued a written statement. "I presented information I believed to be accurate. I had no knowledge of any manipulation, and I'm cooperating fully with investigators. We must find out who is responsible for any misrepresentations." Her response, however, sparked more questions than it answered. If Bondi wasn't behind the altered evidence, who was? Who had engineered the Operation Credibility Kill initiative? And how many similar attacks had been planned? Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett used her growing national platform to refocus attention on the emergency funding bill in a primetime interview viewed by millions. She shifted questions about the confrontation toward the legislation's urgency. While Washington obsesses over political drama, she said, families in disaster zones are still suffering. They don't need viral clips, they need results. Her approach succeeded. 2 weeks later, the emergency funding bill passed with strong bipartisan backing. Analysts pointed out the irony. The campaign meant to discredit Crockett had instead elevated her reputation as an effective legislator. "This is a textbook political backfire," explained a Georgetown political science professor. "The attack failed completely, strengthening its target while damaging its architects. It will be studied for years." As midterms neared, polls reflected an unexpected surge in several battleground districts. Democratic candidates reported higher fundraising and volunteer activity, particularly where opponents had echoed Bondi's allegations. Strategists dubbed it the Crockett effect, noting how exposed misinformation can reshape entire campaigns in the digital age. 6 months later, a major newspaper investigation revealed the full extent of Operation Credibility Kill. The campaign had aimed at a dozen Democratic lawmakers with similar coordinated attacks. Only one was executed, the one against Crockett, and its failure had dismantled the entire plan. That day, a respected political analyst noted, Crockett didn't just defend herself. She shielded her colleagues by exposing and neutralizing the strategy. A year later, campaign finance filings revealed that Crockett's reelection fund had tripled compared to her first race, largely fueled by national recognition from the hearing. The effort to destroy her credibility had instead solidified her as a powerful and unshakable political figure. As one veteran Cap Hill reporter observed, "In politics, they say if you strike at the king, you must not miss." Bondi and her allies learned that lesson the hard way. They aimed at Jasmine Crockett and missed completely. For those following this remarkable political saga, the message is clear. In an age of disinformation, truth still cuts through, especially when delivered by someone ready to fight for it. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more sharp political insights and updates the mainstream won't show you. Tap the notification bell to stay informed on every new development in this historic story.